On Central News tonight, the hard work of the Mawao Wildlife Trust, the type 2 diabetes epidemic, and plans to make the Waikato River more accessible to Hamiltonians. Kia ora, welcome to Central News for Friday the 14th of November. I'm Hilary Entwistle. Established in the wake of the Rena, the Mawao Wildlife Trust has been working hard to monitor the marine birds of the Mount Maunganui area. I caught up with one of the co-founders to find out about some tours they took recently.
Yeah, well, because we're so close to all the houses, and cats can travel quite large distances. So at night time we do have a few domestic cats that come to the island and wreak a bit of havoc amongst our ground nesting birds here. So part of the Trust's goal is to hopefully raise a bit of education, raise a bit of awareness and educate the locals that of just actually what their cat's getting up to at night. Most people probably have no idea how far their cat travels at night, and as there's no houses directly across the road here, they might think that it's not their cat doing it, but they can travel long distances. So we've lost about 30 to 40 diving petrels alone in the last few weeks just from cats visiting the island late at night. And the only thing we can really, they are domestic pets, so somebody loves them. I've got my own cat, I love my cat. So really it's just a case of trying to encourage people to maybe keep it locked up inside at night. Most of your cat fights happen at night. Your cat's most likely to get run over on the road at night. The other issue with Motariki or Leisure Island, as the locals know it, is that there is with all the penguins and the ground nesting birds here, there's actually a lot of diseases here as well. Seals carry lots of diseases that can be caught by humans, we all know that, but penguins and ground nesting birds also carry a lot of ticks and lice, and it's quite a problem on this island. So to bring your dog or your cat here, you're also risking them not only getting something like a problem with ticks and that, but also if they put their head into a hole and there's a penguin or a petrel in there, they will defend themselves, they will peck at their face, and in return that beautiful pet will fight back. So it's sort of protecting both of them as well. Your dog's at risk of losing an eye. Yeah, so it's not just cats that are an issue here, it's also with the dogs. Penguins are very smelly. A lot of our native birds carry things like strong smells. They also don't have the flight reaction because penguins don't fly, for example, but the petrels, they can't take off like a normal bird, so they're at huge risk, especially from dogs and cats, because they don't have the ability to just suddenly fly away. That makes them very vulnerable, and that's why there is very few places left on the mainland that you're actually able to see these birds. So with the dog owners, it is a dog-free area, and it has been for many years. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't sort of realise that. So we'd also like to raise awareness about that pretty much the whole of Tauranga you can take your dog for a walk, and there's only about 3 or 4 places you're not allowed to, and this is one of them, and this place is special. It's dog-free for a reason. It's not just because, we're being mean. It's dog-free zone purely to protect our native birds and also to protect your dog as well.
Are there any birds that have actually deserted the Mount because of the predators there?
Well, without science studies, it's hard to tell whether they've actually been all not here because they were all killed by the pests, or whether they have actually decided to desert. So most of these birds are very monogamous when it comes to their burrows. They'll come to the same burrow every year, and they have a very good home instinct. So you can't just take these birds and go stick them on an island over there, because they'll just fly back. So it's assumed that the other species that bred here, these local populations died out, but there is a few that may have deserted, like the dotterels, may have actually deserted and moved to a less pest-ridden area in order to do that. So we've definitely lost a lot, yeah.
And how can the general public help our wildlife in the Mount?
Just knowing they're there, just being aware that keeping your dogs away from the dog-free zones, if you're local, to keep your cat locked in at night, and also just things like rubbish, stuff like that, everything that you put out, leave on the beach ends up under the rocks and things like that. We have a huge issue with bottles being shoved under rocks, especially around Motariki Island and around Moao. And what that actually does is it's blocking burrows. So it's actually, you end up with a penguin inside or chicks inside and a penguin outside that can't get to their chicks and feed them. So that's a huge issue. Just being aware, take your rubbish with you, and if you see someone with a dog, just maybe mention, hey, did you know it's a dog-free zone? They may not know, and most people aren't aware of it. So when you approach them and tell them, do you know it's a dog-free zone, they're quite happy when you explain to them why to take their dogs and not come back again. So that's pretty much, the locals can get involved, and also by joining our trust, Moao Area Wildlife Trust, where the more funds we have, the more we can help with pest control and help raise public awareness and things like that as well.
To find out more about the Trust, visit their website, moawildlife.org. Coming up next, hypoglycemia. What does it mean? Welcome back to Central News on TV Central. It's Diabetes Awareness Week, and New Zealand is facing an epidemic of type 2 diabetes. So awareness and education about the disease is vital. I spoke with two local experts to find out about the symptoms of hypoglycemia.
So hypoglycemia means low blood sugar. Now in diabetes, and a lot of people get confused with this, in diabetes the main symptoms are hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar. So obviously if the insulin's not working properly and the glucose in the blood gets higher and higher and higher, that leads over a period of days and weeks to high blood sugar. Now hypoglycemia, or low blood sugar, occurs not when you're on diet and exercise, not when you're on metformin, but often and sometimes on glycoside, which is a sulfonylurea, which is sometimes prescribed, and also on insulin. And it often happens when people take too much medication and they don't eat enough, or maybe somebody does a little bit too much physical activity and they've had the drug and they've not eaten enough and blood sugar dips. So people who test their blood sugar several times a day, if they get a blood sugar of less than 4 millimoles, then that is when we start thinking about low blood sugar. And there's really two basic kinds of hypoglycemia, or low blood sugar: mild to moderate and more serious. And a mild to moderate would occur between 3.9 and 3. Anything under 3 would be a little bit more serious hypoglycemia. A lot of people ring me on the helpline and say, I think I've got diabetes, I've got low blood sugar. So I have to explain to them that actually diabetes is about high blood sugar. And low blood sugar can occur for a number of reasons, not always related to diabetes. So people do have those feelings of sweatiness, confusion, drowsiness, fatigue, feeling weak and shaky, and they haven't got diabetes because they're not on treatment, then they need to speak to their GP or practice nurse. But for people with hypoglycemia, less than 3.9, and with diabetes and on the treatment, they would treat that with emergency sugar, as we call it, and that might be jelly beans or juice or glucose tablets or something along those lines. We say look for 15 grams of high, good quality, emergency acting carbohydrate. Then they would test again after a few minutes to see what effect that treatment has had on the blood sugars. And if it's up to 4, then they would have a snack or a meal. Now, one of the problems with hypoglycemia is that it can happen really, really quickly. So somebody might just be feeling a little bit off, and it might take a few minutes for them to realise, oh, I think my blood sugar might be low, I better go and test it. And all the time, the blood sugar's dropping really quickly. I've had people walking around with a blood sugar of 1.5 millimoles, which is really quite low, but they still manage to be upright and conversant. But actually, that's quite a dangerous blood sugar to have. And in young kids with type 1 diabetes, it can be a problem. If you've got a young child at school doing swimming day or lots of physical activity, we know that physical activity lowers blood sugar. We know that insulin lowers blood sugar. Add the two together and you've got a very tired parent because they're up several times during the night having to prick their child's blood sugar to check that it hasn't dipped below the magic 4. And if it has, to get the child, a sleepy, drowsy child, to drink juice to prevent it from dropping even lower. And parents then have to carry on with their normal daytime jobs and activities, having been up several nights every night of the week. Type 1 diabetes and hypoglycemia is not a nice thing to have.
What should the public know if they see someone who is in hypoglycemia?
That's a hard one because people can be drowsy and unconscious for a number of things. So generally, if they're aware that somebody has got diabetes and they are on some kind of treatment, if possible, the first thing would be to put them in the recovery position, as you would with anybody who you find unconscious or drowsy. The next thing would be to call for help, whether that's an ambulance or just shout out for help. And then obviously if you know they've got diabetes, it probably would be appropriate to test them, but not everybody knows how to use a blood glucose meter, so that's not always possible. So I think the next thing would happen, especially if this drowsiness and unconsciousness has occurred quickly, which indicates it is hypoglycemia, to give them some of that emergency sugar. Generally, people who have got diabetes carry things around with them. So they may have jelly beans in their handbag or their pockets, or they may have some of the quick-acting carb.
Does a diagnosis of diabetes mean that you could be at a lot of risk for more health problems in the future?
Yes, definitely, as diabetes affects major organs in your body, your heart, your kidneys, your feet, and even your blindness. So it does.
And Debbie, what is happening in the body with those complications?
So as Tiana said, there's a lot of complications in diabetes, and we tend to class them as micro and macrovascular complications. So you've got some of the macro ones, which is the heart disease and the stroke, which a lot of people with diabetes, they're intertwined, and a lot of people do end up with heart disease and potentially dying of a heart attack. And you've got the micro complications, so that's where the high blood sugar is in the back of the eyes, is in the kidneys, and is in the feet, in the little nerve endings in the feet. And if those blood sugar levels are not reduced fairly quickly, then complications occur and blindness can occur. People have to end up going on dialysis and potentially with amputations due to an ulcer that doesn't heal or some of the complication circulatory-wise in the feet.
And at the end of the day, if we were honest, type 2 diabetes is not a pretty disease to die of, is it?
It isn't pretty. You know, we know people who have to go 4 days a week for dialysis and sat on a machine. We know people that can't walk around because they're too big and they just cannot enjoy life. We know people that have got depression because of all this. It's not a pretty thing to live with. And a lot of blame, because diabetes isn't sexy. And we're trying to change that image, you know, because something isn't sexy, it doesn't attract funding. There's a lot of self-blame. People blame people with type 2 diabetes. It's your fault, you've eaten too much, you've not lived the right kind of life. And we're trying to change that message and say that diabetes can be managed, the complications can be reduced. You just need to try and take some responsibility for your life. Diabetes is one of the few diseases that is self-management. You go to your doctor, you speak to your nurse, but then after that, the minute you walk out of that practice, the medical centre, it's up to you. You have to make a decision to engage with yourself and to start wanting to live for the grandchildren, for the moko, for, you know, the future, for plans. It's really important, but only you can do it.
Why then are we facing an epidemic?
We're facing an epidemic throughout the world. Similar thing is happening in the UK, Australia. Type 2 diabetes, it's mainly around lifestyle choices, obesity, the availability of fizzy drinks, pies, unhealthy food, shops on the way to schools, you know, the fact that supermarkets, etc., advertise all these foods as low fat, baked, not fried, etc., etc. We're being lulled into a false sense of security. And actually, it is not helping the epidemic of diabetes. People eating more availability of food, the fact that unhealthy food is cheaper than healthy food sometimes, not always, so we can't use that as an excuse anymore. But you know, just the environment around us is not helping the epidemic of type 2 diabetes. Look back several centuries ago, although diabetes was around, especially type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes wasn't as prevalent. So, you know, it's obviously something to do with the way we are managing and living our lives now. And the fact that you go to the pantry door and you open it and you can look and there's chips and there's biscuits and there's all those kind of things. And it's easier to have those snacks because they're handy, they're easy, than it is to go and get an apple out of the fridge.
The most important thing about diabetes is that you have support, and you can find that through Diabetes Help Tauranga. Visit diabeteshelp.org.nz or phone 07571 3422. Just ahead, the weather for Saturday and plans to make the Waikato River more accessible to Hamiltonians. Welcome back to Central News. The Waikato River runs through the Hamilton CBD, yet for the most part cannot be accessed or is blocked by buildings. Now, after years of discussion, the Hamilton City Council has released the River Plan, which has been developed over the past year. The River Plan is out for public consultation, and Anne-Marie spoke to Mayor Julie Hardacre to find out details of the plan.
Oh, look, amazing, really. Normally you get 20 people to a council consultation process. We had an open day and got over 200. And look, the overwhelming message from that day that we held in June was, get on with it. We've been waiting decades, give us a river plan. And secondly, a really strong message from that day was accessibility. You know, we want to get to the river, we want to know how to get there, get down to it, touch it, be on it, all of those things. I think Hamiltonians well and truly want to make more use of the river. Some people brought along to that open day pictures of when they were kids and they used to swim in the river and what it meant, you know, decades ago to them, and really wanting to return to that. So look, the plan's been developed over about 18 months, lots of involvement by different groups and key stakeholders, certainly walking hand in hand with Waikato Tainui, who are very important for the river, of course, Waikato Regional Council, Mighty River Power, the River Authority, and we've produced the plan. We've got a month now for people to give us feedback, but look, you know, overwhelmingly people are very, very excited about it.
During that whole consultation process and planning process, did you look at overseas cities such as Perth to get ideas how they've integrated their city with the river quite recently?
We looked all around the world. We looked at home, of course, first. We looked at Auckland and Wellington, and of course New Plymouth's got a great boardwalk on that seafront. So we looked at those sorts of things. We also looked at some of the Australian cities, Brisbane and Melbourne, for example. And yes, all around the world. I think I've looked at every water plan ever made. And look, we got some really useful ideas from some of those plans, principles and things. But what was interesting is the same sort of themes, you know, access, tourism and recreational opportunities, how to get the balance between the hard surfaces and the soft, you know, commercial development and the naturalness of bush and trees. So, you know, I think I can assure you, I've looked at hundreds of them, and you know, I think ours is really reflective of our place, Hamilton. This is a plan for us, but we've certainly taken some learnings from other places.
The projects have been divided up into immediate starts and future goals. Tell me about those.
Well, look, the plan is for a 30-year rollout time frame. These things are not going to happen overnight, but we certainly have to start somewhere. We really want to get away with some, you know, quick and easy things that we can do immediately, and then there's some major projects that will need to be done. So one of the things we're going to get started on straight away is a really detailed plan of the Ferrybank area. That is going to be the premier destination. Everyone is clear about that, but how it's actually going to look, and to get that balance between commercial development, recreational spaces, tourism, that's really got to be worked out in detail. So that will happen. And of course, we really want to get underway with planning for the swimming pool in the river, which is overwhelmingly seems to be the popular one from the public.
Has there been an overwhelmingly popular idea from the plan that's come back in from the feedback?
Definitely, people really have an affinity and identity with that. A lot of people have swum there, particularly older people. It's always been a popular swimming spot, and the ability to create some kind of pontoon-style swimming pool to make it a really safe sort of beach. So you don't need to go to the beach, you can be at our beach. And also the flower bridge, planting the Puketi walking bridge, colloquially known as the sewer bridge, and turning it into a bit of a garden also has got a lot of appeal. So look, there's some great ideas. People have given us boxes and boxes full of their own ideas. But I think over the next decade, there will be a really big commitment by everyone to really get some of the major projects going along the Ferrybank.
There's a very special event happening this Sunday, the 16th, on Victoria Bridge. Yes. Tell me about that.
Hey, how neat. We're going to shut the bridge down and walk on it. That's a neat feeling. And of course that was the first bridge ever built in Hamilton, right back the Union Bridge back in the late 1880s. So this is a sort of an open day, I guess, on the bridge. Come along and have a look at the plan in detail, give us your views and feedback about what you think about it, and at the same time, have a good look at the river, because there aren't many places you can actually do that, and that's what we want to change with the plan.
To find out more, go to hamiltoncityriverplan.co.nz or go to Victoria Bridge this Sunday, 16th of November from 2:30 till 4 p.m. Weather for Saturday, and it's looking wet for most places. Looking to the seas now for Saturday. That is Central News for tonight and this week. I hope you have enjoyed the show. We love to hear your feedback. So send us a message on our Facebook page, centralnews.tv, or email us news@tvcentral.co.nz. Join us again next week for more stories from the Waikato and the Bay of Plenty. Until then, I'm Hilary Entwistle. I hope you have a lovely evening, a fantastic weekend.
This has been an Alpha Media production, a division of Television Media Group.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.